tax. And we, as I'm looking at the report, finished the year with more in property tax, more than $3 million above our budget, and more than $1.25 million above the prior year actuals. We also had better than anticipated sales tax revenue, exceeding our budget by almost $4 million. Now, your comment, Randy, was that part of the reason why the fund balance was significantly higher was lower than anticipated capital project costs. And your note, which I wanted to ask you about, was that we're going to need to evaluate for a potential budget adjustment to rebudget the amounts necessary to complete ongoing projects. I'm going to come back to that if I may. In the revenue picture, I do have a question for you, because I noticed that in the June column, you show $3.5 million. I'm assuming that that includes the actual amount that we collect. Actually, do we have actual June numbers, or are we looking at projected June and June numbers there based on what we will collect in July and August and will then be credited back? This has to do with the cash versus accrual issue.
Right. The 3.5 million that you're seeing in June is made up of the actual collections for the month of April,
right?
And then 2 months of accruals or estimates. And for that estimate, we basically took the average monthly receipt throughout the year, which was about 1.18 million.
Yeah.
And we doubled it, is basically what we did. So yeah, you have 1 month of actual receipts and 2 months of estimates in that June number.
Okay, and it sounded like that will be finalized or corrected when the reports are actually audited. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So before we go any further, any questions or comments from anybody about the revenue picture?
Well, my comment is that it's not just we've underspent on capital items, that we have a lot of cash sitting around, but we've over-received on our estimated income.
Yeah.
So we've got, what, $4,000, $4 million or more that we got that we didn't expect.
Oh yeah, no, that was really fortunate.
Well, so we've got a double header there.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the budget for total revenue for last year was 32.3 million. The actual, if we include the actual receipts during June plus the 2 months of estimates, is 37.4 million. So revenue was significantly higher than we had feared it would be, and that's great news. So thanks, Tom. Any other questions or comments on the revenue side?
Commissioner McKenzie has her hand.
Okay, sorry, I need to, let me move my screen here. Barbara, thank you. Yeah, go ahead, please.
So I believe I'm looking at the same report that you are here in paper. And it says final. So this is the final for last year, right? And so July, which is up there in the far left-hand corner, the July month, which is, I've never understood why, even though we've talked about it many times, why that doesn't have a number in there. I know that you look toward the bottom and you see the amounts, but I don't understand why it doesn't appear in this report. But anyway, that being said, since this is the final number, does that mean that there's never going to be anything in the column up at the top for income, for revenue for July of last year and then all the Julys, because the same mechanism would be in place, that we don't post it again for this reason that I can't quite grasp?
I'm going to take a crack at this, and then Randy, you can correct me, okay?
Sure.
In general, we're looking at, I feel like we're looking at cash-based reports. So we're looking at the amount that we are collecting in a given month, at actual receipts. But what we collect in the month of July for sales tax is actually sales tax that was earned in the month of May. And similarly, what we collect in the month of August is actually sales tax revenue that was earned in the month of June. I'm just going to stop there for a second. Randy, is that right so far?
Yes, you have it right.
And so what we're seeing in this report, based on what Randy just said, is if you look at the June column, that 3,549,674, that includes actual sales tax revenue that was collected in June for the month of April. And it includes an estimate of what we will ultimately collect during the months of July and August for revenue that was generated during May and June. Is that also right, Randy?
Yes, that's correct.
Does that help, Barbara, or no?
No, because that column for July is always going to be empty. And so every year's July column will not have a number in it, or we're supposed to know to jump to June and realize it's in there. And if that's the case, I think we should footnote it better or something.
So if there's one thing that I could point out, Commissioner,
Please.
is on the bottom of this report in the July and August column, in the very bottom rows, we are actually showing the actual sales tax receipts on the cash basis. So you see the 1.2 million, 1,202,304. That's what was actually received in the month of July of 2020. As was the 1,072,794 is what was actually received in the month of August. So when we look at the July report, you're going to see the actual July amount as well. So there will be something in there to reflect the cash basis, but from the accounting perspective, our hands are tied. We have to do those estimates. We have to have 12 equal months shown in our financials.
So I guess, Barbara, all I can say is that, Randy and his team are, they're following the procedures that they need to in order to play by the rules here. And we just have to make the mental adjustment, knowing that we're going to get the revenue. It will ultimately be allocated to the correct year. It's just not going to show up the way that you would like to see it.
So the fact that this is a final report, though, this is final. We're not going to see it adjusted in another month to have anything in that July column at the top.
If I may, so when we call this a final report, these are the final numbers that are in the county's financial system when we close the books. There's always adjustments that come afterwards. And if need be, we can go back and resubmit this as an adjusted report if you'd like to see that. But the real final report should always be your published financial audit.
It'll be the audit, right? Normally, this would be corrected in the audit process.
That's correct, yes.
Which,
to break in here, one of the things that's going to happen is that $3,549,000 figure. That's a partially 2/3 of that's an estimate of what was received in May and June, and we just made it up. So in 2 more months or something like that, we'll have for sure figures, which will be the blank spots for the 2021-22 July and August sales tax income.
and I'm going to go a step further, Tom, and I believe that when we get to the July reports this month, we'll see the sales tax revenue that was collected in July for the month of May. It appears in a footnote at the bottom of the report. Is that right, Randy?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Dave, I see you've got a hand up also.
Yeah, I'm not really concerned about this kind of issue. Everything here is essentially a moving target. There are adjustments made all the time. And as long as we're running a healthy cash surplus, the famous bottom line, I'm not going to get that worried about it. I was worried last year when it looked like the towers might fall into the moat, but they didn't.
Yeah, I agree with you. Thank you. Now, Randy, there was another note that you passed on to Ann with the reports, and you said there's a potential issue with salaries and benefits. It appears that a single pay period was actually posted 2 times during the year, resulting in a total of 27 pay periods being processed versus the expected 26. We're looking into this and we'll keep you posted on what we find. Have you found anything yet about this?
We're continuing to look into it as time allows us to. There are some issues that we are concerned with that I will be bringing to your attention in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, as far as it does look like I believe it was in July, or actually it looks like September, we had duplicate postings for the same pay period that we did not notice when we first put this together. So yeah, we ended up with 27 pay periods. So our salaries and benefits are a little bit overstated in this report. We still haven't quantified exactly what that is.
Okay.
I have a question. Did the 27th pay period actually get paid? Or was that just a clerical error?
This was a clerical error only. It was a journal entry. So yeah, employees did not receive a second paycheck. That's a good question.
Thank you.
Okay. So those were the notes that you'd made, Randy. I wanted to circle back to what you had said with regard to capital projects. Since the commission had allocated certain budget dollars for capital expenses last year, and not all of those dollars were expended, will we need to go through a process of reapproving those projects for this year's budget?
We need to sit down and do an analysis of what is actually necessary to complete those projects in this budget year. And if additional funds are needed because they were not expended last year, then the short answer is yes, we would need to reauthorize those funds.
What does the timing on that need to be?
That's on my list for something to tackle in the next couple of weeks. I'd like to be able to come to the committee next month with an actual number. That's something that I need to work with Ann on as well as the affected division managers. That would be, I believe, Dave, Tikava, and Mike Daw are the primary ones who have those projects in their funds.
Okay. So I'm just thinking you'd hope to come to this committee next month and then to the full commission at the beginning of October. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. In looking over these, I'll use air quote, final reports, did you have, this is to the committee, any other questions or concerns that you wanted to address to Randy or to Erica, who's sitting in for Ann and is well equipped to handle emergencies? Barbara?
Yes, just a quick question. Last week or last time we were talking about Measure Y expenses, and Randy, when you were doing looking into the allocation of Measure Y money, you mentioned that there was there are certain positions designated as Measure Y, but their benefits hadn't been allocated to Measure Y. And I wondered if that is reflected in these reports, the quote, air quote, final reports.
There have not been any corrections to the benefits. Again, that's something that we have not had time to tackle. I
Okay.
still need to get together with the accounting group and take a look at the existing processes that they have now and what type of revisions we would need to make sure that we're capturing not only salaries, but also benefits for Measure Y.
Okay. And those kind of adjustments that in the past we called them transfers, have those all been made, or any of them been made, or is this part of another part of that same kind of topic that we're like the benefit topic?
The primary transfer that we were looking into at the end of the fiscal year was for the books, media, and subscriptions expense. And
Uh-huh.
that was processed. We did that on a 67-33 split between property tax and Measure Y. And that was completed before the books were closed.
So at this point, other than the benefits for the Measure Y designated employees, we aren't anticipating any other transfer from property to sales or sales to property, that kind of thing.
None that I'm aware of at this time. No.
Thank you.
So that raises a question for me, Randy. We've talked about the allocation of Measure Y funds. We've talked about the additional payroll period that is in here as a result of a clerical error. Are those both, and we've talked about the estimated sales tax revenue that will be collected during July and August. Are those three things all adjustments that would be that would make it into the final audit?
Yes, that's correct.
And are there any other big categories that we would expect to make it into the final audit?
There's nothing that I've been made aware of at this time. There are always adjustments for the GASB 68 or the pension and the other post-employment figures. Those are still not available even to the county. And so those are later adjustments, usually happen in early September. And so those will also be reflected in the audit that are obviously not here now.
Okay. So I realize that you're finishing up a year that I don't think you started, or when did we initially engage you and your team?
I think I began working with library around September or October.
Yeah, that was what I thought too. Do you have any concerns other than what we've discussed, or any red flags that you're seeing about last year's financial reports that you would want to make us aware of?
Nothing that other than what we've already discussed. Nothing that I've been made aware of yet.
Okay. Thank you. And any other questions about the air quote final 2021 reports? I will say that I for one have become a lot more comfortable in terms of feeling that we're getting a complete and accurate and up to the minute picture, particularly since you and your team did that deep dive into the bequests, gifts, and donations, and appreciate everything you've done to help keep us on track. So I'm going to suggest we go on to the next agenda item, 5.2, which is the July financial reports. Now, let's see, Jen, can you maybe pull up that first summary? Thank you. So, Barbara, since you haven't asked, I'm just going to comment. There's no sales tax revenue showing here for July. But Jen, could you please scroll down just a little bit so we can see the footnotes on this page? Yeah. So, Randy, that figure, the 1,538,445, that I believe represents sales tax revenue that was collected during the month of July or that we got during the month of July for sales taxes that were paid in the month of May. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And do you have, Randy, do you have any general comments you want to share with us about the July reports?
Not really. Generally, we expect July to always be a very quiet month because there's so much activity happening in June to close the books. So
Right.
we usually expect it to be relatively quiet, and that seems to bear out here as well. I guess the only other thing is that it's nice to see capital projects are still continuing, which were very, very slow to get started last year, but we're still moving on those. So that's really it. Everything else looks to be in where we'd expect them to be for the month of July.
And that was my quick look. I mean, if we're 1 month into the year, we're thinking year to date on straight line expenses are going to be somewhere in the 8% range. I see that's where we are for books, media, and subscriptions, and for rents and leases. Other expenses are a little bit below that, whether they're for other contract services or salaries and benefits. There was nothing jumping out to me as being, way out of line or unexpected in the July reports. I wanted to point out that as we had agreed previously, Randy and his team are now reporting voucher payments over $50,000 rather than over $25,000. So I was happy to see that. Do any members of the committee have any questions about the July reports or any specific items that you'd like Randy or Erica to address?
Andy, this is Barbara.
Yeah.
I'm like an old saw on this topic, so I apologize if I'm repetitive, but the report called in my packet, it's the second page, called Statement of Special Fund Activities, Property Tax. There we
Yep.
go. Just as I guess it would be a teaching moment or whatever, and I don't know that Erica has ever been in a meeting when we've talked about this, but if you look down at the very bottom there, under fund balance, committed to capital improvement and fund balance committed to rate stabilization. The rate stabilization item there relates to our fund balance policy. And our policy is that we put aside 15% with a goal of 20% of our overall operating expense. And you can see that we do that here in the property tax. But if you go to the next page, we do not do that out of the sales tax. And so when I have brought this up, again, ad nauseum, that's what I'm talking, one of the aspects of, it's the essential part of what I'm talking about when we talk about revising the fund balance policy. So since we had these reports up here, I thought this might be a good time to especially point out maybe to Erica.
Well, thank you. That's actually item 5.6 on our agenda today. So I appreciate you bringing it up. I did put it on the agenda specifically because I don't want it to drop off. So I'm going to just ask that we defer the discussion to that point in the agenda, if that's okay.
Right. It's just that these reports, we're going through these reports. It seemed like a good time to point it out. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you for hounding us on. That's important. We need to we need to adjust it. Were there other questions, comments? Okay. Hearing none, I'm going to suggest we move on to item 5.3. And this is the update on the division level reporting that Randy and his team have set up for the division managers. And Erica Ann had indicated that you could give us a quick update on where we are. The impression I got was that overall this was very well received, that there were some suggestions or small inputs to Randy and his team. What can you tell us about where we are here?
Well, the main feedback that I've gotten is that we could use some training. Everybody finds the information useful, but you know, it's most of the division managers have not spent that much time with the software. So that is the thing that we are looking for. And I include myself in that. I definitely feel like I could use some training on this.
Okay. Randy, is that something that someone on your team can provide to the library management team?
Absolutely, absolutely. After access was granted for a week plus, I did reach out to all the division managers to ask if anyone wanted to set up either a formal training or to have them maybe submit questions to me via email. Then I can respond to the entire group to maybe save time. I haven't gotten a lot of response to that, so it's good to hear Erica say that there is a desire out there for training. So I will reach out again and see if we can't set something up. But yeah, we can definitely do that.
Yeah, Randy, if you could just email me directly, I will coordinate that with the other managers.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that would be great. My request it would be that the two of you work to get something scheduled. I'd like to, Jen, I'm just going to ask you to please make a note for us to follow up on this next month. But my hope and expectation is that at that point, either people will have been trained or will have been scheduled to be trained, and we can drop this from our ongoing agenda. Is that okay with everybody? Not hearing any
Yes.
objections. Okay, thank you. So then the next item, and again, this would normally fall to Anne, but since she's not here, I'm going to call on you, Erica. And it was the status report on the website update and the accessibility to budget documents. I did get a short note from Anne that said that Bridget and Rano are working on a redesign of the overall website. In the meantime, the budgets can all be found at a specific URL that she sent to me, and that the audit will be added as soon as it's accepted by the commission. What can you add to that in terms of the progress on the website update and the accessibility, easy accessibility to our budget documents?
So Anne is correct. The budget documents are on the website, but they're not easy to find. You have to search. So basically you can search the website and you will find both the approved 2021 budget and the 21-22 budget. But you can't, if you go to our website and you click on the about, you cannot access it from there. And that's something that I actually just emailed the head of IT about. But you can, if you search the website, you can find those approved documents. And yes, the audit has not been posted yet. I assume we're waiting for the commission to review it and approve it. And then once it's approved, we will put it on the website. As for the rest of the update, they are meeting monthly. They have a comp of the design. If you want to see it, I can share that with you, and you can look at it. It's a static image though, so I can't click on anything, but I'm going to share that. If you don't mind, I'll share that with you right now. Okay.
And I invite everybody to comment. Barbara, I think this was your concern initially, wasn't it? Yeah. So, and I think just to be clear, and we understand that the documents are there. The issue is, can we make it easy for people to find them?
Yeah, yeah. So this is the website redesign, what it's going to look like, and so there's some really fabulous features, and one of them is we have a iconic, we have a version that is easily accessible for people who may have vision problems. They have these icons that we're going to be using. We are also going to be having what they're called book rivers, or basically you have content on book lists, and when you go to the website, you'll have a new book that will be highlighted every time. So it's a river of book lists and things like that. But yeah, I'm hopeful that we can have the at least the web, what they call the menu structure, fixed by next month. So yeah, this is our comp.
I mean, I think it looks great, and I don't think it's the purview of this committee to get into the design of the website. But I would like to keep this item on the agenda simply from the perspective of how easy is it for a casual user to come onto our site and find our budget information.
Right. So it's not easy. I'll show you the, I'm going to share my screen again. This is when I did the search. This is what I found. I think this is it. Yeah. So this lists all of our financial reports, but you can't actually get to this web page without doing a search. There's no way to click. So normally you would go to About,
Right.
and it would be here, but it's not here, and none of
Huh.
these menus lead to it.
Well,
So
that's,
that's great.
could you go back to the previous page for just a second, please, Erica? That's
Sure.
really interesting because I'm looking over on the left-hand side where it says about the library. That looked, on the surface,
Mhm.
similar to what was on the next screen you showed, but it was not identical. And
It's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could I comment on this? So this is how I found it. This is what I brought up when I brought it up. So you can find under the commission, I think it was under commission documents, the financial reports, and you can click on these individual, the links up there, and you can get the budget. No, just stay where you were there.
Okay.
Oh.
I'll go back.
And so you can click on those financial reports and see them. What I found really confusing, what I brought up was the fact that we also have this thing called a portal. And my understanding is that went into effect when we stopped recording our meetings down at Santa Rosa City Hall, and they were doing all of our, recording all of our meetings and everything. And they, kept the recordings in a certain way. And then we went to, we went from Granicus to whatever we use now. And so that separate portal is what got really confusing. It was like a whole separate place that you had to go. This I find really clear. It's
Mhm.
there they are, and you can click on them and you can see them. I don't know why you would have to go to About, because, it's right there, right?
Well, no, unfortunately, go back to the other screen that you showed us, Erica, where it had about the library and the financial reports were not on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like,
So-
oops, that's,
So
yeah.
if I were a user and I just went to the, SonomaCountyLibrary.org or SonomaLibrary.org and I clicked on About, this is what I would come up with. To find the financials, I would have to search, and then I come up with it that way.
Oh, it's also
We
under,
would suggest you fix that.
Yeah, we're working on it.
Okay, all right. So thanks for the update. I think I hope that when the website redesign is done, you'll you and the team will do a report out to the whole commission. But for our purposes, just to be clear, we're specifically looking at how easy is it for people to get to the financials. That's all. Okay.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so now we're on to item 5.5, update on Measure Y allocation documentation and procedures. I had reached out to Ann on this. This is going to be very short, to ask, what's the status? She wrote back, we are working on documenting the procedures. In the meantime, Randy is using a 67-33% split for most categories to mirror our revenue amounts. Some things like capital projects and programming are more heavily attributed to Measure Y. Erica, I know you're not on the agenda here, but do you have any more information about the status of that documentation process?
No, I do not. But I will definitely speak to Director Hammond about it when she comes back.
Okay, thank you. Any comments, questions, or concerns that you would like to relay to Ann through Erica? Hearing none. Okay. Going to move on to 5.6, the update on the fund balance policy revision. Barbara, this is exactly what you were asking about. And Ann's note was, to me, when I asked about this, was, did we want the staff to do the initial draft of the revised policy? And I reached out to Deborah and she indicated that we would. So that's what we have communicated to Ann, but that just happened last week. So I don't think there's any update to be had. I know from our previous discussions that let me see if I can state this clearly and you can either confirm or correct me, that with regard to the stabilization or rainy day fund, the intention is to have that be at least 15% and ideally 20% of all of our expenses. Currently, it's only based on those expenses that are paid by property tax. Is that am I articulating your concern correctly?
Yeah, it's just that our policy is just, it doesn't match up to it just needs a referencing to the fact that significant amount of our income comes from sales tax, and that's not really part of our policy document.
Right. So thank you. So this does not seem to me to be a difficult update. I'll follow up with Ann when she's back, but I'd like to, Jen, if you could please keep this on our agenda. I'd like next month for us to be able to review a draft of the proposed revision. I don't think that's unreasonably soon. Do you, Deborah? Okay, you're shaking your head. It looks like, yeah. Okay. Good. So then moving on to I apologize to everybody. I didn't realize that when I put the audit into the agenda, that Jen would have to put the audit document again into the document. And so I hope nobody just pressed print without realizing that there were 50+ pages here that you already had. I was a little disappointed that we were not able to meet with the auditors last month. I understand that we will get a report to the commission at the beginning of September. Actually, I guess it's September 13th. In the meanwhile, have any of you heard from constituents or interested parties who have expressed any concern about the content of the audit? Or do you have any specific questions or concerns about the audit that you want to be sure we ask the auditors to address when they meet with the commission? I'm not hearing any. Randy, I'm going to ask you a question, and I realize that you were not part of the firm that did the audit, but despite the fact that it took a long time, I was gratified that that the results were without any qualifications. It seems strange to refer to it as an unqualified opinion. Normally, you'd think that's something that's not good, but in this case, it is. From your perspective, anything in the audit that you would want us as a committee or the broader commission to pay particular attention to?
I'd like to say that I've had a chance to sit down and read through it start to finish. I have not. I have perused and gone through some of the areas that are usually of great interest, such as pensions, OPEB, capital projects. So I guess again the short answer is no. I did not see anything that kind of had me raising my eyebrows in concern. No, I think everything looks pretty good.
The second half of this, of course, is the next step. I mean, it was this audit is obviously we're seeing it much later than we ideally would have wanted to. And so the immediate next question for me is, well, when are we going to get to see the next year's audit for the year that ended June 30th, 2020? Randy wrote to me, and I'm just going to read your note here, Randy. He said, Vicente and Brinker is proposing to begin work on the 1920 and 2021 audits in October. They're not available before then, and neither is my staff until we wrap up several county audits that we're currently working on that have a 9/30 deadline. I would like to believe that we could complete both by December 31st. Am I right in thinking that these audits need to be done sequentially rather than simultaneously?
No.
They can be done simultaneously with the understanding that there would be a much greater weight to 1920. We really can't finalize 2021 until 1920 final numbers are done, but you can work on them at the same time.
Okay.
There's a lot of components that you're able to check off the box that you've got those completed without having a quote unquote beginning balance figure to go off of.
Okay, so that's good to know. So it is at least theoretically possible that they could be working on both. In your view, and again, I realize you're not the one doing the work here, but assuming an October start, does it seem realistic to you that they could complete both of these audits by the end of the calendar year?
I believe it's realistic, but that's providing that they don't, when I say they, that Vicente and Brinker has enough staff to devote to the project. They have enough hours to devote to it. I believe 3 months should be adequate time to wrap both of these up. Again, as long as they have enough staff that they can point at it. I don't see it being an issue for my staffing on the auditor's office side. We shouldn't have an issue with being able to provide the day that they need to wrap up the audit. Again, it's just a matter of can they get through their auditing processes, the reviews that they need to do in order to issue their opinions.
Okay, I see questions from Dave and Barbara. Dave, I'll start with you.
At the last commission meeting, I thought Ann said we were going to use an RFP process to select our auditors going forward. And I had the hope that process would apply to the 2021 audit. I have no idea what will happen here. I would like to see the RFP process sooner than later.
Yeah, I wasn't sure when. It's a good question because if we went through an RFP process, could we select a new auditor in time for them to begin in October, or in fact, would that delay the process even more? I don't know the answer to that. Do you have a? I will say I was extremely disappointed with some of the delays that were involved here, and certainly think we should consider a competitive process here. Do you have since you asked the question, do you have a preference, Dave, as to whether we would do that RFP process for the 1920 and 2021 audits, or wait until those are completed and then do it for the next year going forward?
I'd like to split it. I think that they have already got everything possible for the 19 and 20 year, but there's nothing really to do yet on last year's figures. So I would think that we would start fairly soon with an RFP process with the understanding that whoever wins the prize would work on the 2021.
Okay,
I remember Ann had some thoughts about this, so she'd be in charge of this, I would assume.
sure. I see Barbara and then Deborah. Barbara?
It looks like Tom and Deborah both have a comment about this topic, but if you come back to me for a different
Okay.
question about the audit.
Okay, Deborah?
I think that, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. If we consider them for I think we were considering using them for the next audit, just because they know the information. But if we were even to consider them for both of these, I think we need a different kind of a contract, because they need to demonstrate to us that they can in fact do it. And there have to be penalties if they do not do it. I would just they have to prove to us that they can do what they've promised, because we didn't see it this last time. That's it.
Okay. Thanks. Tom, did you have, I didn't see your hand, but did you have a comment or?
What does our current contract with Vicente and Brinker provide for? Have we already contracted with them to do 2021? I don't know. Somebody's got to look at that to see what we have.
Does anybody on the call know whether we have contracted with them to do, I'll start with 1920? Erica, do you know that?
I do not. I actually was just writing an email to Anne about it, so.
Okay, thank you.
If I could jump in here, Andy, I did speak with Brett Bradford. He's one of the partners at Vicente and Brinker, and he indicated that it's been a year-to-year agreement. So that would mean that we do not have currently a contract in place for 1920 or 2021.
Okay,
Well, then could I suggest that we at least be sent a copy of the latest contract that has been enforced? I'd love to see the performance criteria in that existing contract, including penalties. There should be no question. If we don't have a contract for that, I would really, well, let's put it this way. I hope that we have a copy of that contract. If we cannot find it, then of course, Vicente and Brinker would have it.
okay. Erica, could you please include that in your note to Anne?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, thank you. Barbara?
Yeah, I just comment along that is we shouldn't forget that in my memory, the large amount of the delay on this was us. The large amount of delay of us was our turnover in the CFO position. We didn't provide them with the information, throwing COVID. I mean, I don't want to. Vicente and Brinker is an excellent firm with a great reputation. And when we switched from the solo guy that we had a few years ago, and we went out to an RFP, we were all of us on the finance committee at the time really impressed with Vicente and Brinker. Tom, you were on that committee, and I don't want to have this kind of maybe a little bit of an attitude that they haven't been good, because I think they have been good, and we were at fault for a lot of this delay. So just comment on that. What I
Not
wanted
at
to
the
add,
end.
pardon me?
Sorry, not at the end. I mean, the last few months the delays have been on their side.
Okay, well, just. a
Yeah, they
little
said
levity.
essentially they couldn't be bothered, that they were busy, and that they'll get around to it when they felt like it.
Well,
Well-
I didn't think they were trying to send that exact message. I mean, again,
Close enough.
big grain of salt for, COVID and all the related problems. Anyway, I don't want to have a bad taste in our mouths about Vicente and Brinker doing the audit personally, because I think they've done a good job, and they certainly weren't, mostly at fault for the delay.
Point
Anyway.
taken. Deborah and then Tom.
Okay, then I'll come back to my other.
Oh, yeah,
points.
you still haven't made your comment. Okay, I'll come back to you afterwards. Yeah.
I've made my comment. Thank you.
Okay, Tom?
I want to back up what Barbara's saying. We had a lot of problems. They got behind. And what I've learned over the years in dealing with CPAs is they have certain types of work that have to be done on when the IRS says you got to have your returns in. And so if we don't if we want to get our stuff in, we got to get it in and fit it within that cycle. So maybe they were goofing off, but I suspect that they weren't. So I'm just going to say that in their defense. And Barbara, give us the big one.
Oh,
So-
it's not even, it's a little one, actually. But when you were talking about questions for the auditors, this may be something that Randy may be able to answer instead. Page 54 of the audit, can we look at that?
Is it page 54 of the audit or page 54 of the packet?
The packet, sorry. You know, it's big 50.
Nope.
Is this,
Oh, there it is. Deferred outflows and inflows of resources. I came across those terms earlier and I didn't know what they meant. And then here it defines them as the deferred outflows resources. Wait a minute. It has to do with OPEB and PERS. Maybe that's not the right page.
Mhm.
I was just wondering what a deferred inflow, when you're talking about the PERS and OPEB liabilities, how would you have an inflow on that? If Randy might be able to address that.
I'm sure the auditors could probably give you a much better definition. Based what I can tell you is that the deferred inflows and deferred outflows were created a few years ago when they realized that certain categories of accounts didn't really correctly fit as an asset or a liability. Things like deferred revenues, prepaid expenses, and it's just a way of looking at is an amount due at a later date, is it truly a liability now before it's actually due?
Okay.
And that I won't get any further into that because it's like I said, it's very accounting terminology related. I'm sure the auditors do a much better job of explaining it in layman's terms than I could.
Okay, that's helpful though, Randy. Thank you. And Andy, if maybe you could, you know, put that down on your list of questions for the auditors. It's probably a simple thing, but just so we understand it.
well, you know what? You'll get to ask it directly because the next
Okay.
time we meet with them will be during the commission meeting.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Thank you. I thought you were accumulating
yeah.
questions.
Deborah, I see you have a hand up. You're not looking to comment? Okay. So Erica, I'm going to make a request to you, please. I know you're communicating to Ann. We heard a kind of several perspectives on the auditors and their timeliness. I think it seems to me that both things are likely, that in fact, they had to shunt us aside at the end because they had some things that were time critical. And they may have done that in a way that gave us the impression they didn't really care about us as a client. I think the big concern that I would have is that as Ann talks with them and or considers an RFP, that we look at the resources that would be available between now and the end of the year to complete the 2 remaining audits. And I agree with Tom that it's going to be important for us to say, look, we understand in the past we didn't provide you with information in a timely manner. I believe we should now be able to do that. Randy, you went through this for the audit just completed. Do you feel like you and your team have the fixed asset information that was so hard to come by for the current audit?
Yes, that's what I was going to say, is that there was a significant amount of groundwork that had to be done to complete 1819, specifically in the area of capital assets. We basically had to reconstruct the entire listing because we simply didn't have any information available to us. So that was a huge component as far as getting this completed. So that being said, I do think that we now have the foundation set to make 1920 and 2021 much easier to complete.
Okay, and so the concern of this committee, whether we do this with Pacenti and Brinker or through an RFP process with another firm, is given the fact that we believe that unlike for the last audit, we, the Sonoma County Library, have all the information available. We would like to be sure that the firm selected has the resources and is willing to commit them to get these 2 audits completed by year end. Is that okay? All right, thank you very much. Next topic is the CFO search. Erica, I'm going to turn to you again. Can you give us an update on how we're doing, please?
Yeah, so the recruitment, actually, the first review is the end of today. So I don't have specifics. I know that we have about 15 candidates so far who meet the minimum qualifications, but I don't have, names or resumes or anything like that. We will, so it closes tonight. In 1 or 2 days, the recruiting firm that we hired will be pulling together a report for us, and we will review all of the candidates, and those who meet our minimum requirements will be advanced to an interview. So it will likely be done via Zoom. And, I'm hoping that we can find somebody who has the experience that we're looking for. We're looking specifically for people who have public sector or government experience, who have an accounting background, and who understand special tax measures. So we have a list of absolute must-haves, and then we have some, good to have. It'd be great if we had somebody with library experience, but if we can't get someone with library experience, we definitely want someone who has public sector experience.
Okay, yeah. All right, well, look forward to hearing more. This is important, and I'd like to believe that we're going to be attracting some high caliber candidates.
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so too. In the meanwhile, Randy, thank you and your team for what you're doing. We really appreciate it.
Andy?
Yes, Dave.
I have a question on the interview process.
Sure.
As I recall, you were in on the interview that wound up with Jared as the potential CFO. Is the administration's intent still to include the chair of the finance committee on the interviews?
Well, I would recommend it. I don't know what Anne's thoughts are, but I wasn't on that interview panel. Jared and I were hired at the same time. But I would recommend that that Chair Elkind be definitely on the panel.
Okay, thanks.
Randy and I both were, along with Suzanne. Suzanne, I see you're raising your hand. Do you want to comment on this?
Yes, good afternoon, commissioners. Commissioner Elkind and Randy and Erica and Anne and myself will be participating on that panel. So thank you.
Does that address your concern, Dave?
Oh, yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Looking forward, Suzanne, I'm keeping my fingers crossed here. I hope you have I won't ask you to report prematurely, but very eager to hear what you're finding. I'm cognizant that we're after 4 o'clock. Let me just say, I wanted to thank Barbara and Dave and Tom for sending me their questions and concerns relating to the pension. Was also able to locate, and Barbara, thanks for the quick confirmation. I think you saved us all a lot of time. The report that Bartell Associates did most recently for the commission. And I feel like there's an education process that has to go on here, and I feel like I need to educate myself, and that we collectively need to educate the commission on a variety of issues relating to the pension, including how we got here, how things have changed over the last few years, what the projections are, and what the options are that are available to us. I thought the questions and concerns that you shared were great. My plan, as I mentioned in a note to Dave, is to kind of compile and organize them, and ultimately to try to put together a kind of a PowerPoint that I would review with this committee first, and then with the full commission, to answer these questions as best we can, and to pose those that we can't to to Bartell or another appropriate consultant. So I look to involve all of you in what I expect will be an iterative process. I don't know that that how the sausage is made needs to be included in the finance committee meetings. I think this can happen offline. And so I appreciate the comments that you shared. I'll consolidate them and we'll involve you for feedback and additional input along the way. I do feel that this is a topic that we're going to have to devote a fair amount of time and attention to over the course of this coming year. I don't want to kick this can down the road indefinitely. I'd like us to feel like we have a plan for how we're going to dig ourselves out of the significant hole that we find ourselves in and set the library on a sustainable path for the future. So I just want to say you can expect to see this as an ongoing agenda item. Before we wrap up, do you have any requests for additional agenda items for the coming month? If you do, please send a note to Jen with a copy to me. Obviously, we've got time, and we may have something we want to add after the presentation on the audit at the next commission meeting. Thank you all for your continued work on behalf of the library. I am grateful to have all of you on the finance committee, and it's 4:05. We're going to adjourn. Thank you very much. Stay safe.
Bye. Thank you for trying to keep it to an hour.
That's my goal, Tom. I'm sorry we ran over today.
Thanks for chairing, Andy.
The
Bye-bye.
trying is the most important part.
Okay, well, I appreciate your help. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.